Good evening, everybody. It is 6:00 p.m. on the 17th of February, 2022. I'm Mike Capuano. I'm the chairman of the planning board. With me tonight is Rob Buchanan, Debbie Howard Easton, and Jahan Habib. This is the planning board portion of tonight's festivities. We're going to have a joint hearing with the Land Use Committee of the City Council starting at 6:30 on a different link. So for anybody that is expecting to testify at that hearing, that's going to start at 6:30 on a different link on the Land Use Committee's agenda, if you don't have that. Tonight, we are only discussing, or for the next half an hour, we are discussing planning board cases. Then we will put the planning board meeting in recess, and we will reconvene as a joint hearing at 6:30 until that joint hearing ends. And then we will reconvene the planning board meeting tonight to discuss any other business that we have. So pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting of the Somerville Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation. A recording of these proceedings can be accessed at any time using the registration link at the top of our agenda. This meeting is being recorded. Tonight, we have a number of items on the planning board's agenda. The first one is 28 to 44 Broadway, and that applicant has requested a continuance to the March 3rd meeting. Chair moves to continue 28 to 44 Broadway to March 3rd, seconded by Rob. Chair votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Okay, that item is continued. We also have on our agenda the continuation of the hearing on 15 McGrath Highway, and we will open 600 Windsor Place. And our other business tonight, so for anybody who might have jumped in on the planning board meeting and is curious to know what the joint hearing is going to be on, there'll be 3 items. A zoning map amendment at 383 Broadway, a zoning map amendment at 125 Lowell Street, a zoning map amendment at 86 Prospect Street, and a zoning text amendment. Those are listed as other business for us now, and during the joint hearing, the clerk of the planning board will read into the record the notice of those public hearings. But for the purpose of tonight, I will just ask him to read into the record the notice of public hearing for 600 Windsor Place.
Yes, 600 Windsor Place, P&Z 21-059, US RELP 600 Windsor Owner LLC proposes a master plan in the Boynton Yards sub-area of the master planned development overlay district, which requires a master plan special permit.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start with 15 McGrath Highway because we've got 25 minutes until we have to stop this meeting and move on to the Land Use Committee. And that is a hearing that has already had testimony taken and received, a presentation made, and this we as a board have received information that we requested at our last meeting, and the applicant has an update. So if I could have the applicant for McGrath Highway be unmuted and their screen be shared. And I don't know who on staff wants to make a presentation on the shadow study that the board had requested that was done in 2021 for this site, but I would appreciate the opportunity for that to be shared for the public as well.
This is Raisa speaking. I see a few hands that have a list of names. John Sullivan, I have unmuted you. Ian Remy, I have unmuted you. Lorenco Dantes, I have unmuted you. Mike Gerald, I have unmuted you. And Matthew Schnell, I have unmuted you. Who will be the presenter?
This is Mike Gerhardt. John Sullivan will be presenting this evening, and I'll do the kind of opening remarks.
This is Raisa speaking. John, now you have a presenter.
All right, so Mr. Chairman, should I jump right in?
Yes, please.
All right, great. Again, I'm Mike Gerhart. I'm with Leggett McCall Properties. We're a sponsor of the project and the project manager. Joined tonight by our partners at DLJ and Laban Realty. Obviously, as the chair stated, we're here for our second meeting to talk about some of our updated submission materials, which John will go through in a minute. But before he jumps right in, I did want to follow up on some of the commentary from last week from the public testimony, specifically from the Brick Bottom community. And I just did want to tell the board that we had been talking to that community over this past summer. And at the end of the summer, kind of our conversations had quieted down. But between the last hearing and now, we've re-engaged in those conversations, and we had a great meeting with some of their board members. And so I think there's a good understanding developing between us and that community. So it's been a very productive relationship, and we look forward to continuing it. So that dialogue has reopened. And I don't think we don't believe we have any substantial impact or material impact to their snow and ice problem, but we're sympathetic, and so we're talking to them about how we could help there. So with no further ado, I think we'll
give me an idea of what you've been discussing and what concrete plans you might have in place. I'm just curious to see what those discussions have looked like.
Yeah, I mean, so their concerns really revolve around kind of snow and ice removal, and so is there a way that our project could help facilitate their snow removal problems or come up with some way to participate in that? And so that's really what the conversations have revolved around. I mean, we don't think that based on our shadow analysis we really have any material impact, but we're happy to be good neighbors and try to see if we can collectively find a solution that works for the trustees of their association and with us. So I think we'll find a good medium, and we'll find a happy place for both groups.
Thank you.
So if there's no further questions, I know we're kind of on a short timeline. We've got a bunch of material to go through. I think we're going to focus on the architectural side of things. We do have our consulting group available should further questions arise on other aspects of the project. But at this point, I'll hand it over to John Sullivan and SGA, and he'll go through a lot of the details that were discussed at the last meetings. So take it away, John.
Great, thanks, Mike. My name is John Sullivan. I'm happy to be back presenting in front of the board. We just wanted to share an update tonight that highlighted, you can see my screen here, that highlighted, some of the commentary that we received last time. I think there was really some helpful conversations that really, controlled our focus for what we wanted to study and bring back before the board tonight. So again, being mindful of time, we'll just jump in and identify the areas that we've developed in response to some of the comments. I think at the last meeting we talked a lot about the northeast side of the building, the side of the building that faces the community path and the Green Line extension, and there was good helpful feedback that was focused around that facade needing some more articulation, as well as a more pedestrian-friendly response to people that are using that path and how they'll interface with our building. So we took those comments to heart and really looked to make some changes that we're excited to present tonight. Just to refresh, just for briefly on the building, we spent a lot of time at the last meeting highlighting the view of the building from Rufo Road and really from McGrath Highway. We've referred to the building as a gateway project, given its position within, Somerville, and talked a lot about how this building can be experienced along McGrath Highway from, as you enter into Somerville from Cambridge, as you exit Somerville towards Cambridge, and some of the design moves that we made to really signify that. You can see, that's expressed by, really this special moment on the building that's articulated with the warm color fins. And then, what we think is an exciting skin that is, crafted around that, really to frame that moment above the ground plane. We, I think a lot of the dialogue last time was really centered around, the opposite side of the building building, the side of the building that faces the community path. And, we really think about this building as a four-sided building. This building does not have a backside. There are view corridors to this building from, all over Somerville, Cambridge, and Charlestown. So it's really important, to think about this as, a quality design response on all sides. And with that, we took the comments to heart that, were communicated last week with the, as it relates to this facade, that really broke down into three areas for us. One was, how do we respond to the community path, soften that pedestrian experience, make that more comfortable to people that are using that path as, coming in and out of the city. Defining the facade further to, create some more articulation and have it feel a little, less like a glass box, I think, was part of the perception from last week. And then look for opportunities at the penthouse to provide articulation to further break that down. So all helpful suggestions, and that's really where we looked. And part of why we looked at it was really to think about this building, as a true gateway, not only on the McGrath side of the building, but also on the community path side of the building. And starting at that base, at that pedestrian scale, we really did want to craft that experience for, people using that path. So, there's two ways we looked at this. There was a conversation last week about planting, and we'll kind of highlight, some strategy there. And then we've taken that a step further and really looked at, opportunities to provide, somewhat of an art wall along this edge. You can see some of the precedents that excite us, that show, really interesting, art, art moments that, tie into, circulation and people moving by on bikes and on foot. We felt like that this could be a really interesting layer as part of that pedestrian experience, and also be an opportunity to engage community artists, in a way that you could, commission someone from from Somerville to, create a really interesting art expression that could be changed out over time, and other artists could contribute. That's something that we felt like could contribute to or display the core values of Somerville, particularly the artist community. So we're excited by that. Part of the reason why we felt like this was a good response was because of the, the planted edge. And again, there's some time involved with, that planting to mature. So, we're showing a series of elevations here with the community path, with our building beyond. You can see, in day one, the trees will sit, below the community path. I think there was some confusion in the way we're showing this last time, so we just wanted to clarify this. After 5 years, those trees start to approach the base of the community path, and after 10 years, they really start to rise above the community path and provide a much softer edge. But given that, we felt like that art wall, is a helpful first step. And then when the trees mature and it's a softer experience, that can be refreshed and is still an interesting layer, beyond that. And kind of one of those moments that people really remember as they come in and out on that path. And you can see, this is this gives you a sense of what that could feel like. Again, the path is such a special, a special moment in Somerville. Again, a gateway moment at the, pedestrian and cyclist level. And this gives a sense of, when those trees are at that kind of midpoint in their growth, again, they provide some softness, but this, this art that can be, worked into the building facade, really provides that mural moment, something that's memorable, something that's really interesting, and something that can change and be, expressive of Somerville's culture. We're showing this here without, you can kind of see a screen on the community path to the right. There would be one on the left, and it's very transparent, but we deliberately left that up, this rendering, just so we could express, that moment of art. And again, this is just a representation of, to communicate the idea of art, but the art itself could be, something very specific that, could be commissioned by a local Somerville artist. So we're excited by that. And I think what you'll start to see as you look at this image and as we transition to the next one is, the care that we've taken to the facade above. Again, this responds a little bit at a different scale, certainly something that will, people will interface as they go by in the community path, something that people will experience, as they view the building from beyond. But there's a high level of articulation and detail, on the upper part of the facade. And when we showed this last time, I think it had a flat feel. We worked really hard to accentuate the patterning that we've established, which is kind of a staggering pattern that you can see that's highlighted by some accent panels to, really pronounce the fins that are applied to this side of the facade. We'll show you some detail on that, but to really draw those out by introducing a warmer color. Before it was very light, kind of disappeared into the glass. And we felt like, pulling this out with that warmer color really introduces the depth and, interest. You can see some of the precedents to the right-hand side of the screen. And then really further articulate, the notch to the middle, which breaks down the length of the facade and, is a mechanism that's used as a reveal other places on the building that kind of ties in a consistent way. So, we feel like this is really, rich, and you can see some detail as we look close to it. Again, that warmer color that defines the organizing horizontals. It's expressed on the fins as well, and it's really meant to be complementary and tied to the to the warmth of the jewel box that exists on the McGrath Highway side of the site to signify the entry. You can see some of the depths, fins that are 6 inches that tie into these accent panels, and then then offset the glass, and really will provide rich texture and a high level of shadow that will be distributed along the facade. So I think, at the detail level, I think there's some really nice things that are happening. And that, tweak to the color and the finish, I think really does help pull out a lot of the depth and a lot of the texture and warmth. And then lastly, looking at, and again, this is more on the civic scale, but looking at, some opportunities really to think about the penthouse differently on this northeast side of the facade. And we felt like, again, this could be another really interesting opportunity for kind of an artistic response. We're showing some precedents on the right-hand side of this page that we feel like could be applied to our penthouse expression to, provide an art moment, something, again, this is kind of a representation, but something that could be really specific to this project in perforated metal that will allow some light in a very subtle way, to create something really dynamic at night and be something that's recognized around the city as somewhat of a landmark. So, kind of the images on the right, suggest what we think we can accomplish at the roof of the building, which we think will be really special. And it's just another moment to, express, the artistic culture of Somerville. You can see how that, where the building sits. It's important that we're thinking about this on the northeast side, because that moment really is, visible from, kind of from the northeast. The lighting would be subtle, but it would intentionally favor, the more industrial, adjacencies and I-93 and Charlestown, and really not be directed back towards, the more dense neighborhoods of Somerville. But again, we feel like this can be, a really special moment when you see it from afar. That gives off some light, can be something very dynamic and very, very artful. And I think if done well, which certainly we'd work to do, will be a really interesting kind of recognizable moment in Somerville. So it's an idea that we're really excited by. So again, these are all the ideas put together. This is we took that 3-part approach at the base, at the middle, and at the roof of this building. To really bring out that richness, that depth, to pronounce the building more, to express, some artistic and playful moments, facing back towards the city, and to really think through that, pedestrian experience, again, because we think of this building as a gateway, not only on McGrath Highway, but really, from the Green Line and from the community path. So, with that, that's the update on the architecture side. We do have other material to answer any other questions, as well as our, having our team present. But with that, I'll turn it over to the board to, to ask some questions and continue the dialogue.
Great. Thank you very, very much. Before we have a few minutes of discussion by the board, I would ask if someone from the staff could share the screen that was the shadow study that the city had done in 2021 when we were rezoning this area, because that was obviously a big issue of concern from the neighbors over at Brick Bottom at the last meeting. So I just wanted to take a look again, and if someone can explain what we're looking at.
This is Charlotte speaking. I believe the city did not do this shadow study. I believe this was actually done by the petitioner for the zoning amendment. This can be found for anyone interested on the city council's, agenda. I forget which exact meeting, but this was submitted as an attachment and was reviewed as part of the map change. So this shows, sorry, it's a long page. This image shows the original cumulative shadow impacts of 51 McGrath, 35 McGrath, 15 McGrath. I believe also possibly the MBTA tracks. When all of these properties, or under the previous zoning, when most of these properties were high rise. The current expected cumulative shadow impacts with the zoning that I believe was adopted, making 51 and 85 McGrath not high rise, either MR5 or MR3. This is the expected cumulative impact of 15 McGrath, 35 McGrath, 51 and 85.
Okay, so from what I'm seeing, Charlotte, and this is just my kind of interpretation of the two images, is that the building in question for this application was not the one that was causing the concerns from the shadows in the previous zoning. If I'm looking at that image, get back to the other one. Sorry, this is under the new zoning, the one that's current. Yeah. If I understand correctly, the buildings in question are, the kind of the right hand side of what's being developed, and those shadows are going kind of back, whereas the buildings that were modified through the zoning on the left hand side were the ones that were causing kind of the bigger issue, which is why they were changed from high rise to MR3 and MR5. Is that right?
I believe 51 McGrath was changed from high rise to MR5, and 85 and this little triangle were changed from MR5 to, I believe, MR3.
Okay. And can we see what it was before those were changed? Okay. So it was those buildings that were causing, it looks like to me at least, the biggest impact on the brick bottom properties. Is that what I'm seeing? I think that's what
yes,
I'm seeing.
that is my opinion as well. And I, not to speak for the city council, but I think the city council tended to agree based on the fact that they didn't rezone 15 McGrath to non-high rise. If they felt that the shadows made by 15 McGrath in particular were unacceptable, I believe they would have rezoned it, and the fact that they chose not to allows some glimpse into their minds.
Thank you very much. That answers kind of the concerns that I had about the shadow issues that were raised by the neighbors last time. So I just want to briefly address what the applicant has presented tonight. I think it's a very, very much improved kind of back of the building. I think I appreciate the different heights of the trees, where you can show where they actually will be in time relative to what you had shown kind of the first time of being flush with the path. I think the addition of the artwork is something that's going to add some visual interest, and I think I am supportive of the articulation that you have on some of those warmer colors in the back to break up the facade. I know Rob, and I won't speak for Rob, but I know Rob had some concerns with the mechanical penthouse. I think that's an interesting way to to address that concern, because I know there's not really a functional way of making it smaller, but it might be more more visually interesting and not as obtrusive. And I think some of the creative ways that you have proposed to do that are definitely things that we can consider, and I think might be the best way to address the concerns that Rob had, but I obviously won't speak for him. So I appreciate the presentation. It's also my understanding that you don't have the covenant signed with the city yet. So even if we were fully on board right now, it's the planning board's long-term practice that we don't vote on applications where there's a pending covenant with the city. We wait for it to actually be signed, because otherwise there's no way for anything to actually be enforced. So I will ask my colleagues if they have anything to address in the next few minutes before we have to go into recess and continue on to our joint hearing. Yes, Rob.
Just a brief comment. So I do like a lot of these changes, and so I appreciate the thoughtfulness that the applicant team has put in. For the next meeting, I know this is coming back. I know we're running short on time. My last question is really just about lighting in the back. I don't know how much the community path, whether they had any lighting, but to the extent that you have artwork and kind of that base of the building, if you could give some thought about how you want to the exterior lighting and helping to kind of create that safe atmosphere for pedestrians. I'd be interested in hearing more about that next time, the next meeting. Thanks.
Sorry, I was muted. John or Debbie, do either of you have any comments or questions of the applicant for the next few minutes? Okay. I want to thank the applicant. We will see you again in a few weeks. And we will have further discussion. And if there is a covenant signed at that point, we will take that into in consideration when looking at whether we're going to take a vote on this application at the March 3rd meeting. And if not, we can maybe just have some more discussion, or maybe it can be appropriately continued until you get that covenant signed. So thank you very much. So the chair moves to continue discussion of the McGrath Highway property to the March 3rd meeting, seconded by Rob. Chair votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Okay. In that case, we will see you next time for McGrath Highway. We're going to put the planning board in recess right now. We will reconvene as a joint hearing with the land use committee through a different link on the land use committee's agenda page. And then when that is done, we will reconvene here as the solely constituted as the planning board to take up the Windsor Place application. Thank you all very much. See you in a bit.
Mike, I'm not, again, assume I'm good to not be here, but if you need me to be here to recuse since I appeared, let me know.
Since that has not been opened yet, since it was opened, I think you formally need to recuse yourself on the record for the next agenda item, and then you can go.
Very good.
Right, so you need to make me a presenter.
This is Rice speaking. You have been made into an organizer.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 members of the planning board here. We have our fully constituted board. So can we put ourselves back in session, please?
You can continue.
Let me know when we're up.
You can start.
Bryce, are we live?
Yes.
Okay, good. I didn't want to start before. Usually it says the broadcast has begun, but we bounce back and forth between this and a joint hearing, so things are a little bit different. Welcome back, everybody. It's 7:08 p.m. This is a continuation, having come back from a recess of our meeting to go to a joint hearing with the Land Use Committee. We are back now. It is February 17th, 7:09 p.m. I'm Mike Capuano. I am the chairman of the planning board. With me tonight is Amelia Aboff, Rob Buchanan, Jahan Habib, and Debbie Howard Easton. We have already had a discussion on one other agenda item, 15 McGrath Highway, and we have read into the record the notice of public hearing for the other item on our agenda, which is 600 Windsor. So I will get ready to hear that presentation, but first Amelia would like to address the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be recusing myself from this agenda item, so I'll step away now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to wait for you to go. Okay. I would ask for the applicant or the applicant's representative to please be unmuted to identify whoever they would like to have present from the applicant's team, and have whoever needs to present be a presenter and share their screen, please.
This is Rice speaking. I see Greg Karshwowski as hands up. I will unmute you, Greg. Will you be the presenter today? Greg, you're self-muted.
I will be, thank you.
This is Rice speaking. Greg, now you are a presenter.
Hey, Greg, how are you tonight?
Chairman Capuano, I'm doing well, thank you.
Is it just going to be you this evening, or will the other people on your team who need to be unmuted?
It will just be me this evening.
Okay.
Can you all see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Am I free to begin? Terrific. First, by way of introduction, my name is Greg Karcheski. I'm the president of US2. We're the designated master developer working in partnership with the community, the city, and the SRA on the Union Square revitalization plan. Our offices are at 31 Union Square. Where since 2015 we've been working with all the stakeholders in the square on the implementation of the plan. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this evening, Chairman Capuano and the members of the board. I'm actually here to discuss 600 Windsor Place. which actually sits outside of the Coordinated Development Special Permit and Union Square Overlay District and sits inside the Boynton Yards Overlay District. And so we're here tonight to discuss our master plan special permit application for that site. And you know, in terms of our effort to go up about planning this individual site, and despite it being a master plan, it's really just one block, one lot within the district. But you know, in terms of our efforts to plan this particular property, you know, it all starts with the planning foundation that has come before us, right? The summer vision process, which actually predated our involvement in the square, although we've been involved in the 2040 planning process, the neighborhood plan, which we were very involved in, the zoning ordinance, and then the Boynton Yards framework. And, you know, notably the most recent document, the Boynton Yards framework, talked about, you know, Boynton Yards being envisioned to be a primarily high-rise residential district or high-rise commercial building district, excuse me, that will, you know.
1 second.
Of course.
The screen you have shared is text.
Oh.
I don't know if that's what you intended.
That is not what I intended. Bear with me for a second, please.
Yeah.
I'm just going to move. My screen over. Can you see a different screen now? I'm hopeful.
This is what I think you were intending.
Very good. Thank you all. Just continuing, you know, I think where I left off was really talking about the Boynton Yards urban design framework and the goal of creating high-rise commercial buildings to create new jobs in Somerville, help Somerville residents with economic mobility, and really continue to shift the tax base. And then, you know, kind of diving a little deeper into the urban design framework, there are a couple of key principles that guided our thinking about this particular lot. First, from a public ways and thoroughfares perspective, creating, you know, new walkable street networks, including alleys that minimize pedestrian and vehicular conflicts was a goal. Obviously, you know, a creation of more open space in the neighborhood, providing more than 2.5 acres of new civic spaces throughout the district. And then from a building standpoint, really prioritizing commercial floor plates and buildings, preserving the amount of space dedicated to arts and creative enterprise uses, and dedicating space to new community centers. And so, you know, as we start to think about this site and kind of how it sits in its environs, you know, off to the left here is the new Green Line station. You know, hopefully it's going to be opening here at the end of March. You know, this is the D2 site that's currently under construction. We're advancing our design and site plan review for the 50 Webster building, which will be before you here shortly. And then there's the other half of the D3 block, which is a future site. And then you have the 600 Windsor site, right? And then east of that, you have the DLJ master plan. So the 561 Windsor building, and then the balance of their master plan. So, you know, as we look at this site and how it sits in the neighborhood, it's really becomes a bit of a connector, right, between all the work that the DLJ is doing and all the work that we're doing. And so, you know, another perspective about how we're thinking about this site. And, you know, as you all know, the framework that's embedded in the zoning code is to really look at subdividing these larger lots right into their components, a building lot, a civic space lot, and a thoroughfare lot. So I'm just going to walk through each of those components briefly to give you a sense of how we're thinking about dividing up this particular lot. And so on the eastern boundary, hopefully you can see my cursor, we're planning a 4,000 square foot alley or thoroughfare that would align with the Windsor Place Earl Street intersection. You know, this was an expectation of the urban design framework. You can see it here in the upper right-hand corner. It has an added benefit of reducing the number of curb cuts within this property from 2 to 1. So there's currently 2 curb cuts. This would reduce it to 1. It promotes pedestrian passage There's been conversation, even just a couple evenings ago with the Union Square Neighborhood Council about the idea of a pedestrian bridge, over the rail right away. That was an idea, kind of connecting the southern portion of Boynton Yards to the northern portion of the neighborhood was an idea that came out of the neighborhood plan when we were all involved in that planning process. Was actually talked about it as an underpass. I think that idea is, a vehicular underpass. That idea has, since been abandoned for this idea of creating, pedestrian connectivity, which we very much support. We understand that the DLJ team is looking at a couple different locations for feasibility, and one of those locations would be just immediately east of this thoroughfare lot. We're very much interested in supporting that idea and working with the city and DLJ to make that that idea a reality if those feasibility analyses determine that this location is the best location. So our application doesn't preclude that idea. I just wanted to make sure that point was clear. The other item that's notable is not only are we consolidating 2 curb cuts to 1 curb cut, we're aligning our car vehicular access, both cars that will park to access the building as well as loading onto this roadway. So consolidating it and pulling off the pedestrian way, which is very much in concert with the larger scale planning principles that have been part of all our work to date. And then I wanted to zoom in a little bit around this intersection to just talk about, I know there's been a lot of discussion in the community about a really integrated strategy for how complete streets get created in the Boynton Yards district. And so, as part of our application, we've been working with the mobility department or the mobility division and thinking about complete streets along our frontage. And so, we'll create a wider pedestrian realm kind of across our frontage. And then you can see there'll be a dedicated vehicular access point, both in an east-west direction and then able to turn south on Windsor Street. But, kind of most importantly, we'll have a dedicated bike lane, on our side of the street that's consistent with, how the mobility division is thinking about bike access in and around the neighborhood. And then moving now from, we talked about the thoroughfare lot as one component of the public realm, now moving to the civic space lot. So we've dedicated 20% of the net lot area to civic space, or over 11,000 feet. That wasn't an expectation of the UDC. If you look at the urban design framework, it actually, it talks about consolidation of some civic space, but doesn't specifically identify civic space on this lot. We think it's additive, and I'll show you in a minute how it ties into some of the other work we're doing as you head west towards the D3 block. This space will serve to expand the urban tree canopy. It helps to kind of move the building back away from the public realm and provide more light and air to that public realm. And it is located in a way that promotes some connectivity between the public realm on all these blocks that are sort of in a line along the railroad tracks. And so, zooming out for a second to talk about that connectivity, we're very much thinking about, the designated pedestrian streets by the city, Prospect Street and Webster Avenue, and then as AQ Way and Windsor, and, hopefully soon we'll all come up with one name for this street, how it continues. But, we're very much focused on, how that pedestrian path, and this was specifically cited in the Boynton Yards Urban Design Framework, how do we deliver people to and from the Green Line station, right? And how can that be a successful path for someone that's maybe a commuter and is sort of, looking for an efficient path, but also how do we make it a successful path for someone that is looking for, to meet someone or to engage in the retail or to engage in a programmable civic space. And so we're, as we move through the design and site plan review process for the D3 blocks and 600 Windsor, we're looking at, a cohesive plan for how all these spaces interact with each other and how they're programmed. We're also very much thinking about this space, which is actually doesn't look that wide, but is quite wide between the D3.3 project and the 600 Windsor project, as a means of adding some additional green and open space to the neighborhood. And some of the things that we're studying is, how do we keep the streetscape active and also accomplish complete streets components, with having pedestrians and bikes and vehicles next to each other? How do we ensure that the civic spaces are flexible, programmable? And then this idea of civic space and streetscape integration, right? So a lot of these civic spaces front on these pedestrian streets. How do we provide paths for pedestrians to move, but also areas for respite, meeting, and programming? So wanted to make sure the board knew that we were looking at this cohesively, and we will continue to do so as we move forward. And then moving on to the building lot. So we have a building lot of 44,000 feet. This lot is wider than the extents of the building itself will be, as is typical. We'll be meeting green score standards for the lot, so the building footprint will be smaller than what you see here. But this site lends itself for commercial development consistent with the goals of Summer Vision and the urban design framework. It's a relatively rectilinear floor plate. It's up against the railroad, so would seem to favor commercial use over residential use. And then in terms of community engagement and the evolution of our master plan, we had a neighborhood meeting in August that was well attended and had a good conversation. And then subsequent to that, we had some time at the farmers market where for 4 hours we engaged over 100 people about the project and everything that we were working on in the square. And then lastly, one of the comments that was elevated during our last conversation or our neighborhood meeting for this particular project was an interest from the community in having more consistent communication with the neighborhood around construction and how things are progressing with the work that we're doing, particularly because we're right in the heart of the neighborhood. And so one of the things that we established was a website called uscommunity.com. And that website provides construction updates on a weekly basis. So you can actually sign up for a listserv, and on Friday, you'll get a sense of what's happening in the following week. And we try and highlight work that's going to be noisier or disruptive or have impact on the public streets. We certainly recognize and understand that the work that's being done is disruptive to the residents and the businesses that are in the square. And you want to make sure that we have open lines of communication and can mitigate challenges as we see them. We've also been meeting with the city and the US Union Square Main Streets on a regular basis to talk about construction impacts in the square. And so during those first meetings, we described a site thoroughfare, a civic space, and a lab or commercial building that totaled about 400,000 square feet, 12 levels in height. Those are occupied levels, and then 350 parking spaces, with all of those parking spaces being below grade. You can see some of the feedback that we received during the engagement process was around parking and traffic, also around the pedestrian bridge and access to the green line. One of the most significant change that we made to the plan as we moved from our initial proposal to the master plan special permit application was a reduction in both the building program from 400,000 feet to 380,000 feet, but also more significantly to the parking spaces. So a reduction of, from 350 spaces down to 200 spaces, or a reduction of 40%, which puts our ratio, somewhere between 0.5 and 0.6 per thousand, which is it is an aggressive ratio, if you will, from a marketability standpoint. But we recognize, from the community response to our initial conversation, as well as talking further with the city about mobility goals in the neighborhood, that, kind of trying to push the envelope, if you will, about, in terms of those ratios was important to support, those objectives of the city and the community. So, in summary, you can see a site plan to the left here, and then a massing to the right. We're looking at a 12-story life sciences building, 380,000 feet, a new alley that'll serve to, they'll reduce the number of curb cuts, expand pedestrian priority, potentially enable a pedestrian bridge, over the rail right away. And then we'll be adding bicycle infrastructure, across our frontage within the roadway corridor. New civic space, new tree canopy, designed in a way that'll provide some connectivity to the balance of the open spaces that move to the west. And then the building itself will be designed to a LEED Platinum design. I know that during the neighborhood process, someone had suggested that we look into the living building challenge as well as another sort of environmental approach or sustainability approach to the building. As we get into detailed design, we'll certainly take a look at that program. And then, in addition to the life sciences space, or a subset of the overall space, we're planning 38,000 square feet of new arts and creative space to continue to expand the local creative economy, and then 19,000 square feet of civic or of community center space. We did have a conversation recently with the neighborhood council around, whether we would be interested or willing to, work with the other developers in the area to sort of aggregate the civic or the community spaces that we're each providing to maybe make a more meaningful program. And we certainly would be interested and willing to engage in that conversation. There's a significant amount of public benefit and community benefit coming out of the project, shifting the tax base to be more commercial, providing 1,100 new, permanent jobs, contributions, almost $4 million to the Affordable Housing Trust. And then, sustainability goals, open space goals, and mobility measures. I won't go through these each individually, but you can see on the screen the benefits that'll result from implementing the project that's being proposed. And then I also, I know that the staff had issued a staff report on Friday of last week. We had some questions about that staff report. Given the timing, the staff suggested that we present those suggested changes to you as the board this evening for your consideration. So if you can bear with me here, there's 4 of them, and I'll try and move them through them relatively quickly. But thoroughfare condition number 3 says the design of the thoroughfare must not preclude the inclusion of a pedestrian bridge over the MBTA Fitchburg Green Line Railroad right away. We certainly agree with the principles behind that. We're just asking that this condition include language that was included in some of the the other projects that were approved in the neighborhood, suggesting that if a pedestrian bridge is located elsewhere in Boynton Yards, that this condition would be voided. And then the second condition is a little bit more detailed in that perhaps a little more detailed conversation, and that it says vehicular access and easement rights must be provided to any property abutting the proposed alley. So I think this came out of staff looking at the fact that we're proposing an alley along our eastern property line, and then as you move into the Boynton Yards master plan immediately east of us, the most recent amendment that they received approval on included a second curb cut just a little bit down the road from where we are to provide access to their loading. And so, the interest of the city, or the suggestion of the city, was that the parties should work together to see if there's a way to eliminate the curb cut and perhaps expand the road to the east a little bit and provide access in both directions. We're supportive of the intention of the provision. We just had some concerns about the way it was drafted, and that it really put suggested a condition under our master plan special permit that required performance of an abutter that we don't really have any control over. We certainly would like to work something out that works for everybody. So our request is that as you can see in the blue writing here, that the proponent is encouraged to work with the abutting property owner prior to site plan approval, so we can have the appropriate coordination discussions, and that if an alley is modified to a different thoroughfare type, which was contemplated in the staff report, then a mutually agreed upon reciprocal easement right should be documented to allow access and easement rights to and from both properties benefiting from a singular curb cut. And so, just want to make sure that we're having, we have the flexibility to not, be held up by something that's, largely out of our control if the abutter, is not willing to cooperate. But certainly see the advantages of pursuing a solution, the solution that's being described. And then just 2 more conditions. One, civic space condition number 1 suggested that the civic space lot be dedicated to the public by a covenant or other deed restriction prior to the issuance of the required civic space permit authorizing construction. And, we don't have any issue with dedicating the civic space lot. It's the timing here that we're concerned about. Some of the other approvals have suggested that conveyance would occur following completion of construction. We think that's more logical rather than us conveying the lot to the city and then us, completing construction on top of that lot in coordination with the balance of our construction. Seems like it, creates some liability and risk in both directions. The blue language is consistent with the way we're implementing civic spaces in the Union Square CDSP as well. And then the last condition that we had just a question about for your consideration was condition number 3 under the transportation mitigation portion, which really talked about the improvement of Columbia and Windsor Street from the intersection of Columbia and Windsor, which is along our southeastern corner, all the way to Webster Avenue, which is a much wider frontage than 600 Windsor occupies. And I think part of what's contemplated here is a little bit of a realignment of the road to eliminate the jog that exists, which we're open to and understand and think is a good idea. But the issue from our perspective here is that the condition suggests that 600 Windsor property is responsible for improving the roadway all the way to Webster. We think it's more appropriate that the 600 Windsor property would really just be responsible for the roadway in front of its frontage. And so that's what the blue language addresses. And that was really consistent with the conversations that we had previously had with staff. So, appreciate you taking the time to indulge me kind of going through these in some detail, but, wanted to make sure that we were following through in this and you understood our perspective as you were deliberating on this special permit. And then lastly, just wanted to highlight a little bit of the community collaboration that we've been doing broadly in the square, whether it's working with SCC's First Source Job Program on workforce development initiatives. We funded a new employee there. We worked on a jobs fair, and now we're working on placing local individuals into construction jobs. Working very closely with the Green Line. Very excited that we're weeks away, hopefully, from a Green Line station opening. If you've been in Union Square at all lately, this week we actually peeled back the fence to depict to start to make the connection between the public sidewalk and the elevator that we're providing to create that vertical connectivity from the Prospect Street Bridge down to the station. And then we continue to have a great relationship with Union Square Main Streets. We also were able to fund Michael Robles, a new employee there, and work with local businesses, support Fluff and Holiday Stroll for a number of years. Spent some time with the Somerville High School and their career and tech ed program with the idea of really using the project as a learning lab. So we've had 3 different sessions with seniors in the CTE program. And then we've been working with the Union Square Neighborhood Council on the implementation of our community benefits agreement, meeting on a quarterly basis and working through all the different elements that we agreed to together to make sure that the project delivers on those goals. And then lastly, over the holidays, we put together a holiday give event, which we hope is our first annual, where we recruited 9 businesses in the square to gather goods for the Somerville Homeless Coalition. We were proud that as a group in Union Square, we were able to generate 2,300 items for the Homeless Coalition and over $5,000. So we hope that's the start of an annual event that carries forward for many years. But just wanted to highlight, we feel very lucky to be part of this community and wanted to highlight some of the work that we're doing. That's in our view very much just the start of continued effort together. So with that, I know it's late in the evening, but I appreciate the opportunity to share this project with you, and certainly here to answer any questions that you might have.
Greg, thank you very much. Without giving a hint to some of my colleagues, this is not a late night for us. This is actually one of the earliest nights the planning board has had in a while, particularly when we've just come off of the shortest joint hearing with the Land Use Committee that I've ever been a part of. So I appreciate your your efficiency and completeness in your presentation. Obviously, this is a request for a master plan special permit. So again, it is a broader view, application, a broader view look of what will go here, and it's not the actual application for the siting, for the open space and things like that. It's a 30,000 foot view. Usually we, it's obviously, as you know, we usually see a much bigger swath of land with multiple buildings, multiple thoroughfares, and this is kind of a one-off, which is an interesting application. I think it makes a lot of sense what you've presented. My questions have to do with your proposed amendments to those certain conditions that you raised. Now, because the staff report came out last week, I don't know if you have already, you or your team, have been in contact with the appropriate city departments and divisions for those concerns, and whether your proposals have already gone before the people that drafted up those conditions, or if this is something that would be more appropriate to have a separate discussion with them afterwards. I guess my question is this the first time that the administration is seeing these proposed amendments and something that they've already taken under consideration when they drafted the staff memorandum?
Mr. Chair, the conditions were, our first opportunity to review the conditions were when the staff report came out on Friday, and then we subsequently followed up with staff relative to some of our concerns and shared those concerns with staff. We were directed, given the timing, to present those to you this evening for your consideration directly.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. I'm just kind of curious as to the timing. So I would appreciate, I know that there are, I saw Sarah Lewis is here. I saw Justin Schreiber from Mobility here. I don't know if someone from the staff would like to address some of the proposed amendments to those conditions. I fully understand that if this is the first time you might be seeing them, that you don't want to respond to it quite yet, and want some time to digest it, but I will make the offer for staff to present a response or thoughts.
Hi, Mr. Chair. This is Andrew Graminsky with Planning, Preservation, and Zoning.
Yep.
So we go ahead.
Why did you? Oh, there you are. Okay.
So I can address some of the transportation ones. I'll let Justin Schreiber from Mobility answer. But regarding the sort of do not preclude conditions, staff is in support of making changes to address the the condition can be avoided if it's not feasible. As Greg was correct, that was how we approached it with the Boynton Yards Master Plan Special Permit Amendment. So that is okay. But I'm going to ask if we can unmute Justin Schreiber to address some of the conditions related to the thoroughfare and some of the other transportation related mitigation.
This is Raisa speaking. Justin, I have just unmuted you. You are self-muted.
Thank you. This is Justin Schreiber, Transportation Planner with Mobility Division. And yeah, I think I can speak to that thoroughfare condition. Number 5, what was just on the screen, about the sort of the alley access. And I think our intent there is really to just get certainty that the neighboring property is going to be able to connect through that alley to come out onto the Windsor Place intersection. There's a diagram in the staff report that is basically sort of overlaying the 2 transportation access plans on top of each other. And our just concern is about creating these 2 large driveways right next to each other, and just wanting to simplify the vehicle operations at the intersection. So I think we're open to taking a look at it. I think we want to make sure that the proposed language really does provide the certainty that the access will be provided. Understanding that we can't condition a party that's not before us. So I think we're open to suggestion there. We'll be looking at how we can potentially modify that. Any questions on that before I move on to the other one?
No, what I'm going to suggest is I appreciate your, I'm not going to call it a hot take, but maybe your first take on some of these amendments is I would obviously encourage the applicant to meet with the appropriate city staff for when we reconvene on this application to have, to the best of our ability, condition language that everybody is in agreement with and that the staff can support.
Hi, Michael. This is Andrew Graminsky again. We will certainly meet with the applicant, and before the meeting, we will create a supplemental staff memo with any sort of draft language so the board can view.
Thank you very much.
This is Justin again to speak to the other condition about the improvements to the public right of way. It's, our intent here is to ask the applicant to do, full reconstruction and upgrade of their frontage, and then to do more of a quick build implementation that provides the mobility improvements through the rest of that right of way. And this is language that is nearly identical language that was conditioned to a neighboring property. And really what we're looking for is really some cooperation in helping us make sure that we're not going building by building, creating streetscapes that aren't gonna connect together into each other. There's really, really extreme right-of-way constraints on these roadways. They're very, very narrow. There are constraints, for example, the Windsor building across the street where the Taza Chocolate Factory is, and that's an existing building that can't necessarily move back to accommodate right-of-way improvements. So we have a project up at the corner of Webster Avenue as well that's creating some streetscape improvements. So we're really looking for being able to see all of these improvements on one plan and make sure that they work together. There was a great diagram showed by the applicant earlier about an upgraded bikeway heading in the westbound direction. And, for example, we really want to make sure that there's sufficient space to make a similar improvement in the eastbound direction. And really the intent here is to have a single center line plan for the entire right of way width that then as development occurs can be in conformance with that.
Thanks very much. Appreciate the discussion that we're having on some of these things, and I am hoping that when we come back in a few weeks, we will have things that everybody will be satisfied with. Before I open it up to public testimony, does anybody from the board have any comments or questions of the applicant or of staff right now? Seeing none, I am going to open up this public hearing for anybody that wants to speak in support of the application. Please click the raised hand button. I'll call on you in the order in which I see you. Okay, I see two people. So three. So I will ask Aaron Weber to be unmuted, please.
This is Raisa speaking. Aaron Weber, you have been unmuted. Please, if you can state your name and address for the record before you proceed.
My name is Aaron Weber. I'm at 32 Summit Avenue. I had hoped not to be called on first. I am really encouraged by the reduction in the amount of parking here. I know that parking is a really contentious issue. Build for cars, you get more cars. Traffic is the top concern for people. But I think 0.6 per 1,000 square feet seems, according to my cursory Googling, to be pretty good. So that seems like a very positive change for this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weber. The next person I see is, it says they are offline, so I don't know how this is going to work. Margaret Mackey.
This is Raisa speaking. Margaret, you have been unmuted.
We having,
This is Raisa speaking. Margaret is unable to be clicked on the side of
well, it
the
does,
GoWebinar.
does say offline, so I'm not sure what that means. I mean, I'm going to be keeping the written record open until the 25th anyway, so to the extent that there is a technical difficulty, nobody will have the opportunity to not be heard. So let's do this. Let's move on to Seth Grady, and then we'll try to revisit Ms. Mackey in a minute. So if Seth Grady could please be unmuted.
This is Raisa speaking. Seth Grady, you have been unmuted. If you can state your name and address for the record before you proceed, please.
Yeah, I'm Seth Grady, and I'm representing the ownership group of the old post office building, Union Square Partners, which is at 237 Washington Street. And so just want to say I'm speaking on behalf of Union Square Partners. We're continue to be excited about what's going on in Union Square and the redevelopment and what's been happening over the years. We see, and as we plan for what we're going to eventually do in our property to be a part of the transformation of Union Square, we're very encouraged by what we've been seeing in the last several years, and this project that was presented today adds to that. We think that the proposed building at 600 Windsor is an important step forward and continues the project that's already been established in revitalizing the square. The commercial building will generate substantial tax revenues, provide unemployment opportunities, and continue the transformation of Boynton Yards aligned with the vision of Summer Vision. But we're also pleased to see how US2 has continued to be responsive to community concerns. And we like very much the way that bike and pedestrian friendly measures are being taken as the square continues to evolve. So again, as we plan for the redevelopment of our building, we continue to look for signs and other critical elements that the program is moving forward. And we view this new building as one of those signs and strongly support its development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask one more time for Ms. Mackey to be unmuted and an opportunity to present orally.
This is Raisa speaking. I have unmuted you, Margaret. I'm not sure if you're able to speak.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm unable to unmute Margaret because she's offline, I believe.
Okay. I'm going to offer the opportunity for anybody who didn't have a chance to present tonight to offer written testimony to planning@somervillema.gov by noon on the 25th. And that will be part of the record and part of the planning board's consideration when we take this up at the next opportunity. So I will now ask, so I'm going to look one more time for anybody that wants to speak in support. Seeing none, I'm going to close that portion of the public hearing, and I'm going to open it up to anybody that wants to speak in opposition to the application or otherwise express concern for it. Please exercise your raised hand button, and I will call on you in the order in which I see you. Going once, going twice. I see Bill Cavallini. Mr. Cavallini, please be unmuted.
This is Raisa speaking. Bill Cavallini, you have been unmuted. You may be self-muted on your end.
Good evening, members of the planning board. My name is Bill Cavallini. I live at 33 Oak Street. I'm a board member of the Union Square Neighborhood Council. At a meeting with US2 this week, we informed them, and when I say we, I mean the monitoring committee for the CBA in Union Square, informed them that we are anticipating negotiating a CBA for 600 Windsor Street with them. We also shared with them some of the possible elements of a CBA, and we're hopeful that we will eventually successfully negotiate on those elements. I'll just sort of outline them for you and very, very, very briefly. We still are concerned about the amount of parking. We were glad to hear, and I didn't see the early presentation, but we're glad to hear at that meeting that the number of spaces has diminished from their original plan of 350 to 200, and that all of those are supposed to be underground. So I think we can come to some resolution on that concern. What we have not heard anything about is whether they are going to contribute to the construction of the pedestrian bike bridge across the tracks. And we're without a commitment to that, it's hard to see how we could support this project. So that's going to be an element of the CBA. The other concern I have is that I was glad to see that the building is set back some from the street, because across the street from it or diagonally across the street from it is another big building next to 80 Webster. And I would hope that their 3.1 project, a 3.2 project will also set back. And we'd like to have discussions with them about that to broaden the gateway to Boynton Yards. I think that's all I have to say. I'm hopeful that we will reach an agreement, but we haven't even started.
Sorry, I'm muted. I said thank you to Mr. Cavallini, and I look forward to hearing about any updates to discussions with the neighborhood group, and when we reconvene in a few weeks, if that is the appropriate time to do so. I'm going to take a look for anybody else with their hand raised, and going once, going twice, seeing no one else. I will close that portion of the public hearing, and I will open it back up to members of the planning board who want to ask questions of the applicant or of staff, or will make other comments, bearing in mind that this is an application for a master plan special permit, and the breadth of the application that this presents. Does anybody have anything that they would like to add? I see Rob's hand.
Yeah, thank you. Just a brief comment. I am supportive, and I do think it's appropriate that the issue of the abutter easement to the thoroughfare be addressed as part of the master plan special permit. And I understand that the applicant has concerns perhaps about the language, and perhaps can go back with the city folks and see if something can be revised that the applicant can live with. But I do think this is the stage for identifying that is an option and a need that would greatly simplify traffic circulation and pedestrian movements in this area. So, and the other question I have maybe for the next meeting would be for staff. I would like to, my understanding is that this building falls within the Boynton Yards sub area parking cap, and it would be helpful to see where we're at with respect to that cap, just a breakdown of, where are we with respect to that, based on buildings that have been approved to date and where this building fits into that cap. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see John's hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the applicant for the presentation. I am also broadly supportive of this application. I do have two items. Again, this would be for the next meeting when we take up this matter. But the first item is around the community path extension, the possibility of the community path extension. It would be helpful for us to be able to see, either graphically or from a planning perspective, how that could be accommodated within the site. And the other item I wanted to mention was the sightlines from the Prospect Hill Monument. I know that the positioning of the building or the structure may cause some visibility issues. So if the applicant can address that in a future meeting, that would be very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks very much, John. Debbie, I see your hand now.
I did, and this is a question more for staff, and it follows up a little bit on Rob was talking about with regard to the parking cap. Two things. I was wondering if staff tracks, with each proposal that comes in, we often have an estimate on how many vehicle trips the programming in the building is expected to bring. And I'm wondering if staff kind of tracks that as different projects come in, so we kind of have a way to get a sense of globally, particularly in these areas that are envisioning, quite a bit of development over the next, many months and years, what we could be looking at, globally for the projects. And also a question for staff on whether they sort of keep a running, I'm sort of a visual person, but it's kind of a running plan somewhere on the projects that are coming in, have been approved, or coming down the pike, so we can sort of get a visual sense of, like, for example, this, how the alleyway here, plays into what's coming down the road, across the street. I don't know if that's something that the staff does internally that we and the public could take a look at as we're looking at these different master development plans and frankly, just individual projects that are coming before us.
Mr. Chair, this is Andrew Kaminsky. Would you like me to respond?
Yes, please.
Absolutely. So regarding your first question, we do keep track of vehicle trip estimates through their transportation impact statement. And Justin Schreiber is still here, and he can address that if you want specific numbers, but that's a component of that documentation that is part of the application process and what an applicant submits for a complete application. And then for the second question, I don't know if we have a database like a map or anything via GIS regarding like the modeling of the district, but that is something that I could look into further for you.
Thank you. And just back to the initial vehicle trips, I know that's in the TIAs that everyone submits, but I was wondering if it's tracked, again, kind of generally in Boynton Yards or in a general region of the city. So we know, this one brings in, another 250. That one's expected to bring in another. I know you can somehow anticipate a bit, depending on how much parking is going to be there, but not entirely. I didn't know if the city tracks things that way as well, more globally, in terms of anticipating increase.
I'm going to ask if Justin Schreiber could get unmuted again to potentially answer that question. He may have the answer from a transportation standpoint.
Sure, this is Justin. We don't have a tracking database per se, but that's something that we could definitely put together based on the different TIS. The other thing I know is that the TIS themselves take into account other development going on. So for example, the most recent TIS for this project takes into account the trips generated by the neighboring development projects. So when they're doing that vehicle analysis, they're adding in their trips, but they're also adding in trips from known developments that'll impact the area. They're not necessarily separated by projects, but they're included in the analysis.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Anybody else? Seeing no further questions or comments from the planning board. I look forward to taking this up again, hopefully at our next regularly scheduled meeting, which is March 3rd, at which I will not be able to attend. So I'll certainly keep abreast of that and follow up when I have an opportunity to review the recording. So at 8:02 p.m., which might be a recent record of the planning board, especially following a joint hearing with the land use committee, which can stretch for many, many hours. The chair moves to adjourn, seconded by Rob. Chair votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much. And the planning board will reconvene on March 3rd.
Mr.
and
Chair,
sometime thereafter.
this is Raisa. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure we made a motion to continue the item in discussion.
Planning board is back on the record and the chair moves to continue the application at Windsor to March 3rd, seconded by Rob. Chair votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Okay, wonderful. Chair moves to adjourn. Seconded by Rob. Chair votes aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's all around.
Aye.
Thank you all. Really appreciate your
Everyone
time.
have a good night.
We have unanimous votes to both continue and to adjourn. Good night, everybody. Go have dinner.
Thank you.